We welcome everyone to the second day of the workshop on innovation, diversification, and sustainability of the sugarcane agroindustry, the Colombian case, a space that takes place exclusively within the framework of the session of the Council of the International Sugar Organization, ISO, in this 58th version. In our schedule today, we will have the speech of different experts who will share their experiences and knowledge in different advances and processes of the agro-industrial sector of sugarcane, and you will be able to share your questions related to the exposed topics through the Q&A button located in the upper left part of your screens. We remind you that you can also share your concerns regarding the organization of the event through the chat button found in the same section of the Q&A button. Broadcasting from Colombia as the host venue for this great international meeting, an event supported by the Association of Sugarcane Growers of Colombia, ASOCANA, and supported by the Colombian Association of Sugarcane Technicians, Tecnicaña, and the Research Center of the Sugarcane of Colombia, CENICAña. We give the opening to this academic day with the moderation of the Executive Director of the International Sugar Organization, Dr. Jose Oribe. Welcome, Director.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and good to see you again. Welcome, everyone, to the second day of our international workshop of our 2021 mid-year meeting with Colombia. I'm certain that yesterday was a very productive day for most of you, and we were able to learn down to the fine, minute detail the different aspects, the different elements, technical, research, and development that make the Colombian sugar sector what it is today, one of the leaders in the world. Today, we will take a slightly different tack, and together with the organizing committee, we have put together a program with some renowned international experts to complement the 100% focus on Colombia of yesterday. But nevertheless, we've got a surprise for you in the last presentation from Dr. Freddy Garcés. I won't steal his thunder, so we'll wait for them. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking of asking our host to stop these beautiful videos of Colombia, because every time I look at them, I feel like I should be there. And regretfully, because of the pandemic, we are now interrelating through these virtual platforms and not in presence. But believe me, the minute that I have the chance, I will jump on the plane and come see all that magic that you have been showing us for these past few days. Today, we are going to kick off the international workshop with a very special presentation from my friend, Dr. Plinio Nastari. I think Plinio needs little introduction to the majority of you. Datagro is a world-renowned consultancy that I think does an incredible job of comprehensively covering the most relevant incidents and news in the sugar and biofuels world. But their capacity, I think, is that they managed to conjugate all this data, all this raw information into intelligentsia and make it, for those of us that look at it, with increased value added. Plinio has a long-standing career in sugar. He has been the heart and soul of the Brazilian Renova Bio project, and I couldn't think with the organizing committee of anyone better to give us a perspective on the international market than Plinio. Plinio, welcome to the 2021 mid-year meeting and 58th council session of the ISO. It's an honor to have you with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Director Jose Oribe. I'm honored with your invitation to participate in this 58th Council session of the International Sugar Organization. It's a pleasure. And I take this opportunity also to greet Dr. Claudia Calero, President of ASOCANA, through whom I compliment all cane, sugar, and ethanol producers in Colombia. I also greet all ISO Council members who are attending this session. Well, you have asked that I address challenges and prospects for sugar, ethanol, and energy markets. And we have separated a few slides we would like to share. I would like to start indicating that we are living indeed different times with the pandemic. And after seeing oil prices falling to negative ground on Black Monday, April 20, 2020, when oil WTI fell to minus $43 a barrel, and gasoline RBOB in the US to only 40 cents of a dollar per gallon. Since then, from a number of situations, and mainly OPEC plus Russia action and the recovery in world demand, we have seen oil prices coming back to over $70 a barrel recently, and gasoline to around $2.2 a gallon. Also, another indication is US gasoline consumption, which in this month of June has recovered to 9.5 approximately million barrels per day, surpassing for the first time the levels observed before the pandemic 2 years ago. Also, we have seen a recovery in mobility, and the vehicle movement, according to the follow-up of Apple Mobility, indicates that in most economies, mobility has returned practically to normal, except for India. So based on an index 100 in January 2020, we can see that today in the US, in France, in the UK, and even in Brazil, we are back to the mobility levels, or even higher than mobility levels observed in January 2020, except for India, which is suffering the peak of the impact of the pandemic at the moment. But as energy markets have recovered, we still see the world consuming less sugar out of home. So when we measure through Google the mobility for retail and recreation, which includes visits to restaurants, cafes, and shopping centers, we can see that in Brazil, France, and UK, these levels are still down 19, 14, and 11%, respectively. In the US, also down by 5%. And in India, 59% behind. Visits to groceries and pharmacies have returned to normal after the initial shock in most countries, except as well India. In terms of currencies, and currencies are so important for the value and price of commodities. And because of the weight of Brazil in sugar and ethanol production, it's so important to check always what is the value of the Brazilian real with respect to the US dollar. And here we can see on the graph on the left, in green, the Brazilian real, and we can see that after losing ground to the US dollar during the most pressing months of the pandemic, now we have seen the real rising back against the dollar to levels around 5 reais to the dollar, therefore reinforcing support on sugar. These developments are not definite yet, because of the medium-term challenges which still remain, but these have been surprisingly positive developments for the Brazilian currency. which reinforce the price of sugar. Well, while at the same time, we see all this happening in energy and sugar consumption, we see that world sugar production is increasingly concentrated in Brazil and India. So between 2014-15 and 2020-21 marketing years, the combined share of Brazil and India in world production has risen from 36.7 to 42.5% in raw sugar equivalent. And we can see this in this graph. And why is this so important? Well, it's important first because Brazil has a sugar industry where we have a large share of cane being diverted to ethanol, both anhydrous ethanol, here shown in blue, which is blended in gasoline, currently at 27% blend level, and hydrous ethanol, which is shown here in green, which is used by the neat fleet and the flex fleet of vehicles in Brazil. Sugar in yellow. And supply of total reducing sugars, which had been stagnant since 2010, since 2019, started to grow again. And we can see that clearly in this graph, indicating that in year 2000, the supply of total reducing sugars was around 34 million tons, rising to 87 million tons in 2010, keeping that level of 87 to 88 million tons until 2018, and since 2019, rising to achieve 94.6 million tons in 2021. Ethanol production from cane has varied according to relative prices. So production mix has been very flexible to accommodate relative price changes. And while in 1920, ethanol production from cane reached 33.9 billion liters, in 2021, it retreated to 30 billion liters. At the same time, sugar production has also adapted to the response to relative prices. And in only 1 year, between 1920 and 2021, Brazilian producers added approximately 12 million tons more sugar into the market, which were absorbed given the shortfall in production, which were observed in many geographies, mainly Thailand. This flexibility in producing sugar and alcohol can be seen here in this graph, where we show the proportion of total reducing sugars, which is being devoted to sugar and ethanol, anhydrous plus hydrous, in the Brazilian sugarcane industry. And you can see that in 1 year, the shift in production mix has been as high as 11%. 11% over 94 million tons of TRS provide for the changes that we have been observing. And this is happening, interestingly, at the same time that ethanol, mainly hydrous ethanol, which is used by the flex fleet, has lost competitiveness in all Brazilian states. So even though hydrous ethanol is more expensive for consumers to use than gasohol E27, is still a lot of consumers continue using hydrosethanol for budgetary reasons. The price of gasoline is so high that consumers prefer to continue using hydrosethanol because it's an easier way of filling up their tanks. So for that reason, ethanol sales have remained strong in this 2021-22 crop. And we have seen sales of hydrosethanol at very reasonable levels, and sales of anhydrous ethanol even higher than the two previous years. In terms of prices, because of the combination of prices of oil, which have recovered, and the exchange rate, ethanol prices have also evolved very high. Here on the left graph, you can see the evolution of gasoline price at refineries without taxes, and the prices of hydrous and anhydrous at producer level in São Paulo, net of taxes. And we can see that the anhydrous premium over hydrous has also been very high, indicating that there is an incentive for producers to produce anhydrous ethanol, which is blended in gasoline. When we look at the evolution of ethanol prices, we can see that in this year, 2021, ethanol prices, both hydrous and anhydrous, are very high and much higher than the max level of the previous 5 years, and much higher than the levels observed in the 2 previous years. Petrobras has maintained gasoline prices following approximately the movement of the import parity. The price of gasoline at refineries has been unchanged now for a month, but still, in spite of that, it's only 6.2% below import parity, keeping up the policy that Petrobras has been following in the past 2 years. Also important for us to understand what is happening in Brazil. Brazil has resumed exports of ethanol to California. The arbitrage for exports is open at a considerable value, and at the same time, arbitrage for imports is closed, indicating that ethanol prices will be sustained throughout 21 and beginning of 22 in Brazil. This is also due to the higher ethanol prices in the US, which have been sustained by the rise in the price of corn, which has risen to $6.6 a bushel. Ethanol production, which plunged 12.3% in 2020 to 52.8 billion liters, is now recovering again, and ethanol production in the US is back to over 1 million barrels a day at the moment. In terms of sugar, all which is happening with sugar, in spite of the reduction in out-of-home consumption, is providing for a firm cash market. And cash values for prompt VHP sugar shipments through the Port of Santos are higher than the 5-year average, with moderate sugar stocks in Center-South Brazil. When we compare price equivalencies of sugar and ethanol all measured in cents per pound, FOB Santos equivalent, we see that the product which is remunerating the better for Brazilian producers is anhydrous ethanol, even higher than VHP sugar for exports. Why the connection with India? Well, because India is going towards the same path of diversification as Brazil. India, whose 2021 crop is coming to its final stretch, a crop which should end on September 30 this year with 31.2 million tons of sugar, white value, and which should repeat another large production in 21-22, given the prospect of monsoon rains close to the 30-year normal. India's export parity for raw sugar, including the export subsidy, is estimated by Datagro currently at 16.62 cents of a dollar per pound, FOB. And if we do not consider the subsidy, the export parity is now at 19.07 cents per pound. So as India completes the quota and sells all the subsidized quota of 6 million tons, additional volumes may be coming out of India, and we may see India producers selling sugar at levels which will be determining a ceiling for the New York raw sugar market. And the range, the likely range of prices in New York will be determined by the price of hydrous alcohol in Brazil and the export parity without subsidy in India. So just to recall, hydrous ethanol in Brazil is currently hovering around 16.9, 17 cents a pound. And as I mentioned, India is emphasizing its choice of ethanol in its energy environmental policy. And here we see a brief chronology of what is happening in India. In July 18, India authorized the conversion of rich molasses and cane juice for ethanol. In September that year, prices for ethanol were set at higher levels than sugar to stimulate ethanol production. In January this year, the 20% ethanol blend mandate was anticipated from 2030 to 2025. In March this year, pure ethanol distribution was authorized, opening room for the introduction of flex vehicles. This past May, the 20% blend mandate was again anticipated now to 2023. And we have seen a rapid evolution of the blend ratios in Indian gasoline pool, moving from 4.8% in 1920 to 8.5% in 2021, likely to reach 10% or more in 21-22, and the target of 20% in 23-24. So as we see a rising proportion of sugar production being produced in Brazil and India, and Brazil and India being able and having this diversification to ethanol increasing, we see a greater dependence between sugar and energy markets because of the connection on ethanol. At the same time, we have seen lackluster Thai sugar exports. And here on the left, we see how Thai sugar exports in 2020-21 have been much lower than the two previous years, and how Thai high-pol sugar price for prompt delivery has been negotiated at a high premium because of this reduced availability for exports. Weather remains favorable for cane now in Thailand, and we see a coming back of Thai crop, while last crop Thai ended crushing with 66.7 million tons of cane. We are projecting that for the next crop starting October, Thailand will be able to crush 85 million tons, being able to produce, therefore, some 9.5 million tons of sugar telkel. Sugar exports for 21-22 are estimated at 5.8 million tons from 3.9 in 2021. In Europe, we see beet egg yields expected to recover for 21-22 at 1.8% above the 5-year average. Therefore, we see sugar production in Europe recovering to 16.3 million tons white value from the level of 15.35 observed in the previous crop. Our estimate of world S&D indicates for marketing year 2021 ending September 30, 21, a deficit of 2.82 million tons raw value. And for marketing year 21-22, a surplus of 1.71 million tons, which, to be frank, are small and are indicating a level of equilibrium given the flexibility that exists in these sugar economies, which have the possibility of changing production mix. Why is ethanol become so important to sugar economies? Well, at COP23 in Bonn, a declaration of vision issued by 19 nations, which represent over 50% of world population, endorsed by the International Energy Agency and by IRENA, calls that to achieve the 2-degree scenario, which means limiting global warming to 2 degrees. The target for humanity for 2030, and 2030 is only, let's recall, only one cycle of cane away, almost. The target should be for the proportion of bioenergy in world energy demand to double in proportion, and the proportion of sustainable low-carbon biofuels in transport fuels, including land, sea, and air, should triple. And that scaling up bioeconomy is possible given smart agricultural practices, better use of rural and urban waste, and proper policies like RenovaBio in Brazil, which has been proposed by the US Congress to be adopted on a national level in the US. IRENA and the IEA estimate is that ethanol's production, which currently is around 108 billion liters, should rise to 500 billion liters by 2030 and to 1.12 trillion liters by 2050 to most cost-effectively achieve Paris Agreement's goals. What does it mean? It means that the size of the ethanol market which is already larger than sugar. So ethanol demand at 118.9 billion liters is already larger than sugar, should rise by 2030 and by 2050 to levels which are equivalent to increasing sugar production tenfold. So which are the takeaways of my presentation? First, sugar is becoming increasingly dependent on the energy market because of the linkage with ethanol. Brazil and India have increased their share in world sugar production. And like Brazil, India is increasing its diversification towards ethanol. Surplus sugar in India will be increasingly absorbed by ethanol. And as India introduces flex vehicles, flexibility in production mix, which is observed in Brazil, will start to happen in India. And diversification of production in India will increase the strength of Indian production. And we see the sucrose molecule and its byproducts tending to become increasingly used for other products: ethanol, power, bioplastics, amino acids, vitamins, biogas, biomethane, pelletized bagasse, and others. For this reason, sugar tends to have an increasingly support role in a more diversified industry. So, talking about sustainable mobility, different countries will adopt different solutions. Some countries don't have the possibility or the advantages of using bioenergy. These countries are opting for battery electric vehicles. But many countries have the ability, the land, the sun, the manpower, the availability of organic materials to produce bioenergy. And there are many countries in that situation. Many countries that don't need to install a new infrastructure for recharging batteries. Countries that have the possibility of not having to spend the large sums of money to introduce very expensive battery electric vehicles in their mobility systems. These countries, like Brazil, India, Colombia, many countries in Latin America, Central America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, including China, have the benefit of adopting bioenergy, ethanol, biofuels as a solution for sustainable mobility. And for this reason, we see sugar becoming increasingly dependent on energy markets. Thank you very much. Thank you, José.
Thank you very much, Plinio, for that excellent presentation and the comprehensive coverage of the various variables that we have around the world and that inside in the sugar market. I think that we are all still scratching our head, wondering why the prices continue to be so high. But I'm certain that exporters in your home country of Brazil and in mine of Guatemala don't want to talk about it. All they do is smile. So in the measure that the prices stay up, I think it will bode well for the sector. It will bring in much needed income to promote the diversification. And hopefully it will encourage many other countries to pursue the route of ethanol. I think Brazil has set the pace for this. I think you have demonstrated the virtues and the success story behind it. And countries should do well in extrapolating what is applicable to their own pragmatic reality and move quickly so that they can take advantage of not having all their eggs in the same basket. We have a couple of questions for you, Plinio, in the Q&A. One of them is very interesting. It's from our friend Joao Jeque from Apamu, Mozambique. And Joao says there is news about a study in South Africa confirming the feasibility of producing sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, ethanol derived from sugarcane. Certainly, this would create a better alternative for farmers in our countries. Could you please, Dr. Nastari, comment on the significance of this issue in the context of the international sugar, ethanol, and energy market? Plinio.
Well, thank you very much for this excellent question. Of course, from the limited time of the presentation, I could not tackle all these issues, but it gives me the opportunity of making a very important comment on this. Yes, we are following up this development, and it's true. It is a big potential, in particular because more than 120 countries in the world are signatory to the CORSIA agreement, which preconizes the neutralization of carbon emissions from aviation. So all the airlines of these more than 120 countries have to implement ways of neutralizing carbon emissions in air transport. How to do that? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do electrification in aviation. Well, they will have to continue using liquid fuels, which are clean. And yes, biojet fuel produced from ethanol is a big solution. And we see that increasing rapidly. And this will be a great way out of absorbing additional ethanol production capacity and sugar production capacity. And this is happening already on a demonstration mode in both Brazil and India. And we see a lot of things happening in this way. Also, one way that airlines can comply with their commitment is by buying decarbonization credits generated from the sale of ethanol for mobility in land transportation. So, like RenovaBio created the CBIOs, which are currently traded at the Brazilian exchange, other countries can do the same. And by producing ethanol, producers can sell decarbonization credits, and therefore this is becoming a fourth product in their production mix: sugar, ethanol, bioelectricity, and now carbon credits as well.
Thank you, Plinio. Along the lines of this same issue, do you foresee that given Brazil's lead in incorporating carbon credits through the RenovaBio program into the exchange, that we might have a similar modality in the international level in one of the exchanges? I mean, I recall that when the Paris Agreement was in effect, many mills in Brazil and Guatemala, all the cane producers, audited their cogeneration of electricity with bagasse, and thereby accrued credits that they could then sell in the Bonn stock exchange at that time. Do you foresee something similar happening for ethanol?
Yes, not only for ethanol, but carbon credits generated from the whole production system, which may include as well biogas and biomethane produced from sugarcane residues. And this is another line of diversification which is developing very quickly. The whole creation of RenovaBio and the decarbonization credits behind it, the CBIOs, has been designed planning the fungibility of these credits in the international arena. So we foresee that CBIOs in the future may be generated in other countries as well, provided that they establish a similar legislation and equivalent certification measures, which are very rigid for RenovaBio, but which guarantee for companies who may be interested in acquiring these credits to mitigate their commitments to become credible. This credibility is being built up at the moment, and we see a great potential, in particular because of the values of carbon which are being traded today. So while currently the CBIO price in Brazil is around $5.5 to $6 a ton of CO2 equivalent, it is in the start of the process. In Europe, the emission trading system in the European Union is paying $64.7 per ton of carbon. In California, it's paying $190 per ton of carbon. In Oregon, it's paying $125 per ton of carbon. So there's a huge potential for creating value from production of bioenergy through ethanol, biogas, and biomethane.
Thank you very much, Plinio. I think that the call to arms issued by Brazil should be heeded by countries, and they should seriously look like India is doing at present, their diversification into ethanol. It's cost effective, it's environmentally friendly, it reduces your dependency on a volatile sugar market. It's a win-win situation that we believe in many countries, members of ISO, would make a world of difference. And once again, now that international prices are at a decent level, we encourage people to save up and establish a kiddie fund to diversify into ethanol and take advantage of the wealth of knowledge and experience that Brazil has accumulated through the years. I know that Datagro is there openly to provide its consultancy services on the matter, and our friend Flavio Castellari and his group APLA are also in the best disposition to assist anyone that has a keen interest in pursuing the fabrication of ethanol and enhancing value added from their cane. Plinio, with this, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. I pray that you, Huti, and family are keeping well, and hopefully that things will go back to normal in Brazil so that we can then come visit you in Latam and ask whether they are using SAF when we fly them. Thank you very much. Thank you, Plinio.
Thank you, Director José Uribe. It has been a pleasure and an honor to participate in this so special council session in Colombia. Again, my greetings to our Colombian friends and neighbors. And one final word, not only it's good for the economy and for producers, but it's good for the environment, for the quality of air in all our cities. So this is very important, is in particular in a moment of pandemic. My greetings to the entire ISO family, to you personally and your family. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Plinio. We will now take a short break to some commercials and then return with our second speaker, Dr. Brian Laverack, directly from Down Under. Thank you.
Continue with the second lecture, Diversification of the Sugarcane Agrobusiness in the Global Context, by the Director of the Byproducts Commission of the International Society of Sugarcane Technicians, ISSCT, Brian Peter Laverack. He has a PhD in Sugarcane Co-Products Senior Technologies at McKay Sugar. The questions for the lecturer can be sent through the Q&A button located in the upper left part of their screens. This will be answered in a personal way through the email that you provide us with the question you ask. Welcome, Dr. Laverack.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Laverack. Today, I am going to be talking to you on the diversification of the sugarcane agro-industry in the world context. I am the chair of the Co-Products Commission of the International Society of Sugarcane Technologists. And so I'm going to talk to you a bit about a few things. So today I'm going to be talking first on about the International Society's Sugarcane Co-Products Commission. I'm going to then talk about Rule 1, it must add value. Then looking at further along, the criterion for developing a diversification industry, the so-called PESTLE. I'm going to just review some of the first generation co-products that are out there in the industry. And then I'm going to give some sort of observation on co-product development and look at the basic market guidelines going forward, and then look at the next generation of co-products. And after that, we'll just review what I've said today and then possibly take some questions if we have time. Thank you. Right, so the first thing I wish to just say is that this presentation and the discussions following are the views of myself, presenter, and they do not represent the views of my current employer or its parent company, nor do they represent the views of the Australian sugar industry, nor the Australian Society of Sugarcane Technologists, ASSCT. For this presentation, the term diversification refers to products that do not contain sucrose, fructose, or glucose. So in other words, diversification is into anything except sugar. The International Society of Sugarcane Technologists, or ISSCT, is an association of scientists, technologists, managers, institutions, and companies and corporations concerned with the technical development and advancement of the cane sugar industry and its co-products. It's formed from 5 particular commissions. They focus on agriculture, biology, co-products, factory and management. So I'm the chairperson of the Co-Products Commission, and the ISSCT has congresses which are held every 3 years, and they typically attract between 1,000 and 1,500 delegates. The next Congress is planned for December 2022 to be held in Hyderabad in India, and that is, of course, COVID willing. So there's a bit of a question mark around that. In between every major Congress, there is a workshop that is held for each of the co-product sections and subsections of that. And the next Co-Products Commission workshop is on the valorization of factory products, which is the theme of today. And that's planned for December 2021 in Brisbane, Australia. And again, this is COVID willing. So you're most welcome to look it up on the ISSCT website for further details. Just to give you a bit further background about ISSCT. So the congresses are held every 3 years, and we have proceedings that go back to 1924. It contains a massive amount of practical information, really wealth of information concerning the industry in general and co-products in particular. The Congress proceedings are date back to 1924, except for the war years where we missed out a few. And the website is given on the presentation. Okay, so ISSCT workshops are held between congresses and are a major learning opportunity because of their open and free-flowing discussions. So if you can make it to a workshop, I find them to be particularly useful because you can throw ideas there. And it's not as formal as the actual congresses. And usually the groups are fairly small, and you get to really thrash out and work through particular opportunities. As part of these congresses and workshops, there are visits arranged, and you can see the actual state-of-the-art production facilities and research and development places. Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit now and perhaps just reiterate one of the things which sometimes gets forgotten, and forgive me for being a bit taking you back to this basic rule. If you're going into diversification, it must add value to your factories or your organization. Sugar producers diversify into co-products, not into byproducts. The word byproduct has the image of a waste stream with limited value, whereas co-product means the product has value. We used to talk about byproducts in the 80s, but in the 90s we started to use the term co-product because it does have value. So if your team is involved in a diversification project, consider the product as a co-product, which is adding value to the manufacturing process. You're on the correct path to diversification. If the co-product you intend to diversify into is not adding value to the business, it is a loser. It means stop work on it and move to the next idea. The product has to add value to your company. Otherwise, don't do it. The next rule is been classified as PESTLE. There's a whole series of criteria around this. Now, there's various versions of this. This is the latest flavor of the month. So when you're going into diversification, it must satisfy these particular criteria. The criteria are: 1, political, and this is important. You have to have government support, and the policies and the taxation policies, the rebates, and all the other bits and pieces, you have to have government support for the particular project you're going into. The second criterion is obvious, is economic. You've got to have access to finance. You have to have access to interest rates that are suitable, taxation policies, markets, and a good rate of return. And that is usually just basic. The third one is a new one, and it's got to do with the triple bottom line, is social. The projects that you undertake today have to meet the cultural values of your society, the demographics. You have to have educational levels for the people who are consuming that are actually involved in your particular project. The third item there is technological, the state of the technology. Is it proven at demonstration level? Is it pilot, or is it lab scale? If it's lab scale, well, you're taking a massive risk to go into it. So you want to actually have these things proven, particularly at demonstration level, before you venture into it. And then, of course, then there's the obvious capital and operating costs, and these tie into that second factor of economics. The fifth one is legal requirements, and this relates back to the political one. In other words, what is the current and legislation? More importantly, what are the actual future trends? So if you're having problems with environmental legislation at the moment, what are the future trends as far as that goes? Also, things like safety and labor laws are really critical. The last factor is usually a major one, and I'll relate this with the top two, is environmental. Environmental is becoming more and more a major issue today, particularly with greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, and the zero emission targets that have been set, climate change. In a word, the environmental, it means the process must be sustainable. You're using sustainable materials going into it, and the products must be sustainable. Well, now, when you start looking at the diversification options, you will find that there are a massive number, and almost limitless. So the opportunities to diversify have been written up in textbooks, and it's just worthwhile to mention some of these. Our Sitka, who's based in Central and South America, have produced a really good book, and it gives you some options. It is a little bit dated now, but there are some. So these are, I would call, first generation opportunities. The second one is a book is by an Indian author, Manohar Rao, in 1997. The classic textbook is undertaken by Morris Pattarao from Mauritius, and produced in 1988. And then there is a cane sugar engineering handbook written by Dr. Peter Ryan. And that's actually, there's a new version of it I've got there. It's 2007. There's a later edition now come out 2017, and he does mention some of the opportunities more in the first generation aspects. Of course, there's a multitude of papers, and I just wish to draw your attention to a particularly good paper that was delivered at our last Congress of ISSCT by Regis Leal and Juliana Teodoro. It's got some valuable information. All of these references are given at the back of the presentation, so you'll be able to see them there. But of course, the overwhelming impression from these textbooks and presentations is that there are a bewildering number of options. So I cannot go through all of them, but what I will do is go through some general observations based on the history of the industry. Okay, so the first ones I'm just going to talk about is sort of the larger scale ones. These are major diversification projects with large capital costs with reasonable returns if they're well managed and supported by the respective governments. So of course, you go back into sort of the modern era. The first major the first major co-products is ethanol production for consumer markets. So it goes back into the 1650s with the Caribbeans when they produced rum. And from that, there's just been a continual development, and it's continued to grow. And so potable ethanol has been there and will continue to be there. This has then evolved through into the first generation of fuel ethanol production, and in particular, Brazil with their pro-alcohol program, which is spread throughout the globe to places like India, Colombia, and many other countries, too numerous to mention. The next major co-products field is cogeneration, and in particular Brazil, India, Mauritius, and many other countries, including Australia, are undertaking that. So it's a major opportunity, and which has been taken. Pulp and paper has been there for a very long time, and there are major producers, particularly in India, and Argentina, and other countries. So it tends to be a major industry. There are usually some sort of issues around the environment. So there has been some recent work undertaken on looking at alternative technologies, and I have been involved in that as well. So on a smaller scale, from the larger projects, there are other projects that usually require a small amount of capital. They give reasonable returns, provided the products and the opportunities are well managed in marketing. So the first then is animal feed production from molasses and bagasse. This is pretty standard in a lot of countries. If the company is not doing it itself, it is selling on molasses or bagasse onto somebody else that can actually produce these particular animal feeds. So they've tended to be fairly rudimentary, but have advanced with time and are now becoming a lot more sophisticated and can be very profitable. Of course, there's the usual fertilizer, compost, and soil conditioners from from mill mud, ash, vinasse, and bagasse. So there's various combinations there. And of course, I must mention that in India, they are world leaders in this. They really have taken this down to a fine art. But all countries, including my own, have got some sort of form of fertilizer production where they're returning effectively the nutrients from cane production back to the fields or to the wider community. Particle and fiberboard has always been there. There tends to be sort of under the radar. There doesn't tend to be a very high return. One of the major companies in Australia actually started off in this particular field, and in fact has grown to such an extent that that company is now a major building product supplier, and is in fact even has divested of its sugar interest in total, and is now just a building products supplier. The final option that I've put down there is yeast production. This has been there. So there is various types of yeast production. Usually they can be at the organization or can be external to it. So the yeast production base for bread manufacture or actual animal feeds. There's a really lucrative market there. There are some other niche markets, and I'll just mention a few of these. So you can produce acetic acid, you can react it with ethanol, and you can produce ethyl acetate. Some people have taken this a bit further, have got phenol, and they make salicylic acid, and then they produce aspirin, and other fermentation products. In particular, I just need to mention the Andhra Sugars company in India is a leader in this. They produce something in the order of about 50 co-products at their one site. A few others, dietary fiber. There's a small company in Australia making dietary fiber, and it's proving very lucrative. In East Africa, they found there's a nice niche market in producing distilled water, and you don't think of these things, and apparently it's good business. Again, in Africa, dust presents very often. For example, they've used in the past molasses or vinasse, and they can either combine it with materials or put it onto roads as a dust suppressant. Sometimes they've also used it in minerals as well, just to suppress the dust in mining companies. Furfural is an interesting one. It's been around there. It could possibly be called a large industry. There are two major producers, but there's a lot of competition from outside. And in this regard, there's a major unit, from my understanding, in Central America and one in Southern Africa. And there might be some on the way in India. Hand sanitizer is the flavor of the month with COVID. So this really relates to ethanol. And it's a lot of companies have taken short-term advantage of this particular product. Paper plates, again, this relates back to pulp and paper. At our last ISSD Congress, previous one in Thailand, we went around and they were producing paper plates, pulp from bagasse. Again, a nice little niche market and a good one. There are pelletized fertilizers, again, on the same theme as the larger ones. So places that I've seen in India where they actually make smaller quantities of that, they bag it for the home market and possibly for horticultural producers. And of course, there's trash or cane waste. Trash is perhaps not the best term. It's in English. It's used for golden mulch, for bales for animal feeds, supplementing basin cogeneration plants. And I've just got a picture here of a demonstration unit that we visited during one of our ISSCT workshops in Brazil. And this is a demonstration unit for the collection of 600 tonne a day of field cane residue or trash. You can see on the left there, they're actually putting it into bales and transport plus storage. They move it in the big trucks, just to show you. I don't know if I've got my pointer. So they bale it in fields, they collect it, bale it, and then they move it in these large trucks. They store it in this unit here. You can actually see the truck going in. They then move it along. It goes through a debaler. It then goes through a cleaning unit, and it then goes through a shredder, and then they feed it as supplementary feed for a cogeneration boiler. And this was at the Ferrari mill in Sao Paulo state, Brazil. It was part of the Sucre project, and it's possibly one of another report that's worthwhile reading. And the final report for Sucre is on the web, and there's further details in the last slide. So there's been numerous successes in diversification. So in addition to the first generation co-products of ethanol, cogen, animal feeds, fertilizer, and there are numerous diversification successes. These are also in related industries, so that are particularly into lignocellulosics, and into other agro industries such as rice and corn, etc. And those particular industries produce sugars or have lignocellulosic feedstocks. Co-products are integral to these businesses and are often not publicized. They tend to operate under the radar, and we don't hear or see of them. Their production methods tend to remain hidden from us. We don't see them. But there are some really important examples that are out there. There's a slogan there that you can do anything except make money out of lignin. There's one Scandinavian company that has been making money out of lignin for decades and has been doing it successfully. It's just, by the way, that same company also has been producing ethanol as a byproduct, and I use the term byproduct or co-product, for many years, even before the term second generation ethanol came into play. So they do it as it's a very small operation compared to the larger, but their focus is on producing lignin for various products. So let's move on to the future, post-COVID, I would like to say. So what does the future market really want? So there's a newer generation of people out there, and they're starting to demand things. And they're looking at, first of all, is they do not want products that contribute to climate change. So there's a major discussion at this moment in time about targeting zero carbon emissions by 2050. These are real things. These are happening now. The products that we are making, they have to be non-offensive to various cultural groups. We've got to cater to those ones. You don't, the people that are making consumer products do not want to offend consumers. So the products have to be vegan, they should be kosher, they should be halal, they should be, and there are other cultural groups out there that we do not want to offend. And those big manufacturers want to sell into those particular markets. The product should be biodegradable or non-polluting or recyclable. We do not want to be polluting our oceans, our land, and the air. On the same thing, we do not want to destroy the natural environment, so rainforests and barrier reefs. So in Australia, for example, there's a great push on the moment to actually minimize any runoff that goes out into the Pacific Ocean and onto the Great Barrier Reef. Furthermore, our products have to be certifiable to good manufacturing practices. So there's things like Bonsucro out there that is doing these things. These are basic, obvious things. And in a word, the whole thing is summed up by the term sustainable. We want to have sustainable products, and we want them to be sourced from sustainable raw materials. And hey, sugarcane co-products are ideal for this. They meet all of these particular things, or with a little bit of management can be made to fulfill all of these things. So we've got a major opportunity here. So what about price? My company can make sustainable aviation fuels. We've done the study. We can use whatever the technology, I call it XYZ technology. But the price is 3 times higher than aviation fuel. It's not going to go anywhere. Yes, that is true. But we're starting to see changes to these markets that were formerly the sole domain of oil refiners and producers based on fossil materials. There are many technological developments happening that are reducing the cost of production, but the important thing is perceptions are changing. Consumers are changing their ways. And with it, governments' views and legislation are changing. A lot of major airlines are doing trials on that. They know the future. They are doing this. This is happening. And a lot of consumer product manufacturers are actually now going out there and are specifying packaging materials for their consumer products that have to be produced from sustainable sources. And furthermore, they are willing to pay a premium. In the old days, the product had to compete. And invariably, it was found to be very difficult to compete with oil, with material produced from oil sources or other fossil materials. So let's talk about the next generation. So what's on the way already here? So second generation ethanol is here. It's been produced from bagasse feedstock, and there's 2 major examples on sugarcane, Cosan and Gran Bio in Brazil. There are other producers out there that are using other feedstocks, and there are other smaller places that are producing it from sugarcane. They tend to be a little bit under the radar, but it is here. The one classic story about co-products is that from farnesene for sustainable fuels. It can be used in SAFs, sustainable aviation fuels, but the company that actually was looking at it has found that it was far more lucrative to produce those oils to go into hand lotions and creams, and the producer there is Amyris in Brazil and worldwide. So they found that it's a really interesting example of going into one particular field and finding it's not economic, and then diverting into another. So as I said, it's a really good example. Another one is really in the corn industry is PDO, or 1,3-propanediol. They produce a fiber called Serona. I'm sure you've all heard it in the USA. But there's major opportunities developing. At the university been working with in Australia, they're looking into variations in animal feed with newer technologies. Of course, we have to relate back to our growers of cane, and very often there are fallow crops that have to be fallow has to be undertaken. So there's cropping of soy and soya, which can be used to make a renewable oil. So it's a major opportunity. In fact, in Brazil, that you can actually, there's major advances in this particular field. The other one that is really exciting at the moment is industrial biotech. It goes by the name of it goes under various names, but industrial biotech for the production of fiber and protein is here, and is a major, it's really revolutionary what is happening there. I just need to mention some of the other products. Biofuels Digest on the internet listed solid hot and a few years ago, and is mentioned in the paper by Leal and Teodoro, is 1,4-diacids, succinic, fumaric, and maleic acids, 1,4-butanediol, 2,5-furan dicarboxylic acid, FDCA, 3-hydroxypropionic acid, 3-HPA, glutaric acid. Now, these things are used as precursors in various materials. They're used in plastics. Major opportunities here. So there are various organizations that have produced reports on these. So there's the E4 Tech report. There's a lot of US government agencies that produce reports. You just have to search the web for these particular things. So where are we at? The global challenge that is going forward. There's a massive opportunity exists for the sugar industry to use its sustainable credentials for the production of new co-products. In particular, there's a major revolution being underway in industrial biotech. It's just, I was chatting to somebody the other day, and the revolution that has just taken place is just astounding. So there are new co-products being developed, particularly in protein, particularly for the vegetarian market. So we're having the so-called Impossible Burger out there, which is based on vegetarian, but tastes like meat, and it's fake meat. So there's a large number of opportunities, and it is growing daily. So industrial biotech offers really some major opportunities. I just give a reference there from Chemical Engineering Progress. They had a special supplement in 2019, which gives you some, but just get on the web and there's some major advantages. The other thing that I should mention also is if you're going into second generation ethanol, one of the co-products there is you're removing all the hemicellulose and the cellulose, and you're left over with the lignans. And there's a major opportunity to developing lignans, and there are some major advantages in the lignin field as I'm speaking, and there are some commercial developments out there. Again, I'm not going to mention the companies, it's not my place to do so, but if you get on the web, you will find them. So companies need to take stock of their future markets and develop strategies to tackle them. Several barriers exist to diversification. And really the main one is they have to go in competition with fossil-based products. They're in established markets, they've been around there for generations, and we have to go into them, and that is the major problem. The other one, it really relates to the major fluctuations in oil price. We've gone through this crisis with COVID. We found that the oil price went down to rock bottom, and now it's coming up again to what it was about before COVID started. So this plays havoc when you're looking at products, and it's really very difficult. The other problem is really a kind of like a good one, is that we have too many of them. There are too many options out there. We really don't know what to focus on, and so there needs to be some sort of concerted effort to actually focus on a few things. One of the main advantages from the lessons that we learned from the pro-alcohol program in Brazil was it was very focused. They knew what they wanted, and they knew what products they were, and they knew what technology. And by focusing on that, they had a concerted program, and they developed it, and they went for it. At this moment in time, there simply are so many options out there. So I'm going to conclude with a few remarks now. First generation products will be continuing, and there will be a move to the next generation of diversified products. Biotech and the use of lignin will almost certainly play a role in diversification. The choices are simply bewildering. And perhaps there should be a goal to target a certain number of products. This is really, I think, where we should be aiming at, is rather focusing. So when you go and look at a lot of these reports, you will notice that they have got a particular, they just take a short, they've got a short list of products there and only evaluate there, simply because the choices are so bewildering. The other thing is, of course, there are going to be horses for courses. Every region has got their advantages and their major disadvantages. And so you need to take advantage of those particular opportunities that you have got. So Australia has got certain advantages and disadvantages. One of its disadvantages is small population and markets, but it's got the Asian continent at its doorstep. We really need to look at the overriding goal. When you're looking at any co-product, the rule number one is to make sure that it is actually adding value. I've seen very many opportunities where people go down the line and they don't understand what they really are doing. And they just forget that basic first rule. The co-product must add value to the business. It must make money, and it must be sustainable. Very often people go down these tracks and they throw money into projects, and they should really just say, that is enough. It's not going to make money. I need to get out of it and withdraw. And very often they get blinded by just the technical aspects of it. I've seen one or two of these things happening in my life, and it's just not good for that business. The second learning is you have to conform to all the pestle factors. You need to make sure that the political aspects are there. Is it going to have the support of government? Is it going to have the support of the local population? Secondly, it has to be economic. It must have markets. Markets are usually a very difficult aspect. So it needs to conform to those, the economics, and have a good return on investment. Perhaps the other major issue is environmental. All of the products need to use the credentials of the sugarcane industry, which has got a major advantage as far as environmental goes. Lastly, I just want to make a note about the story about regions. You will find various regions have got natural advantages and natural strengths, and you need to play to those strengths and to the particular markets that you have got. Okay, I'm just going to go through some of the quick references I've made today. So Chemical Engineering Progress, they have got a special edition out, and I've used that as a reference. E4 Tech is a report that has been undertaken for the European Commission. It's a little bit old now, 2015. I have given you the reference there. Maurice Patterol is an excellent textbook. I've used it many, many times. It has got it's the only real issue that I have got is it's got the wrong title. It's called Byproducts. It's produced by Elsevier, and it's based on a man who's had a wealth of experience and has produced many papers at ISSCT. ICITCA is an organization based in Latin America, and they have produced various papers. There is a handbook, and my old friend Regis Leon has undertaken many reports, and a particular one on ISSCT, on a global view on bioproducts. That one has got a really good summary of all the major opportunities. Manohar, again, a very similar textbook to Patara, giving the a major Indian perspective on a lot of the aspects. It gives a real thorough review of the first generation of products. Dr. Peter Ryan on cane sugar engineering. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll have to conclude my talk today. If there are any questions, you're most welcome to provide them. I thank you very much for the opportunity to address you, and I thank you.
We'd like to thank Dr. Brian Laverak for his intervention. Very interesting, very complete, very diversified into many, many areas where sugarcane can venture into. Please, everyone and anyone who has a question, a comment, or whatever for Dr. Laverak, please send it to us via the Q&A function, the chat function, so that we can take it to him and he can get back to you. You can always contact us via email. We will be glad to address any issues that you feel require his expertise. Now we will take a short break of 15 minutes to go get a cup of coffee, good Colombian coffee, and we'll be back with the rest of our program. Thank you.
Before moving on to the next speaker, we remind all attendees that they can ask their questions through the Q&A button found in the upper left part of their screen. The president in the International Society of Sugarcane Technicians, ISSCT, and director of the Ecuador Sugarcane Research Center, SINCAE. Raul Castillo is an agricultural engineer and has a PhD in plant breeding and genetics. The topic that he brings us is pandemic and resilience in the global sugarcane agrobusiness. Welcome, Dr. Castillo.
Buenos días primero.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
It's my pleasure to be here in this important international workshop of the 58 ISO Assembly. I thank you all, the organizer, for having me here in this important event. Also, I would like to endorse and thank you, Brian, for the nice and clear summary on ISSCT that he gave a couple minutes ago, showing the opportunity to share knowledge around the world between technicians and industries that are associated with the ISSCT. Thank you, Brian, and thank you for the opportunity to talk this morning and the afternoon in different places in the world. Having said that, today I'm going to talk on the pandemic and resilience in the global sugarcane agribusiness, which is a topic that it's very wide topic. It's very interesting as well, and I put some ideas here just to discuss and talk with and share with you during this 30 minutes talk. Okay, let me see if my slide moves. Okay, it's moving. So my presentation will go through trying to define a little bit on what is resilience. Then we will move to sugarcane industry, resilience through time. Then we will talk on resilience through institutions and organizations, going to ongoing challenges. We know that we are facing climate changes and also the pandemic of the COVID-19. And I'll put some ideas on the continued resilience for the sugarcane industry. Okay, then what is resilience? Resilience is just, the capacity to recover from difficult life events. And I found this interesting statement from Neil Webb, saying that resilience empowers people to accept and adapt to situations and move forward. And this is something that every industry and even people would take an account and move forward in different stages of their life. Then, what is the resilience through time, the sugar industry resilience through time? I will start discussing or presenting to you the origins of the sugarcane. We know that about 80,000 before present, in New Guinea, sugarcane was used, widely used for different purposes. And India starts trading sugar with China at about 4,500 before present. And also the ancient Greeks and Imperial Rome called it honey of India, known as sakara, meaning sweet. Then the Spanish people took the word also to call azúcar, which is known now in English, sugar. And in the Americas, the Spaniards brought sugar to America in 1493, around 1493, and the sugar becomes a very valuable commodity in our region in the America. I'm just showing a picture here of sugar of Saccharum of Cinarum taken in New Guinea in 1914, which was a very initial expedition of wild sugar plant collections, and there were lots of interesting villages showing very tall, high, and very sweet Saccharum of Cinarum canes over there. Then in the Americas and elsewhere, the sugar became extremely valuable commodity produced in the tropical and subtropical areas. We know that in 1515, a primitive sugar mill created by the Spanish friar Gonzalo de Vilosa, governor of Hispaniola Island, started a very, very basic primitive refinery system. Then in 1580, the expansion of the sugar production from Hispaniola and other small islands were very, very important. In 1795, the sugarcane was already expensive, growing in Haiti, which was a French colony, and then Dominican Republic, later Cuba, Brazil, and other countries of South America. In 1747, the first serious competitor for sugarcane, sugar beet, was used to extract sugar in Europe. In the 19th century, while sugar extraction was perfected, which lowered its price, sugar beet subsidizes in Europe were implemented. European dominance from 1909 to 1913 was the largest producer, with about 42% of total sugar production. During the World War I, much of the European beet sugar industry was destroyed due to the war, which was a very bad situation there. And for that, sugarcane resurgence later on from cane output, which rose elsewhere, especially in the Americas, with significant growth in Cuba. Prices, of course, were not quite stable as is happening nowadays. So sugar rapidly declined between 1919 to 1920 because of those situations that I'm talking about. From 1920s to 1950s, sugar producers stored stock until higher prices were met. This was kind of confusing and also, limiting stocks in the markets. But farmers or business people wanted to store sugar until higher prices were met. The speculative fever for land started in Cuba, leading to the Dance of Millions, very well known, the Dance of Millions. The dance, however, ended abruptly as sugar prices sank below those of 1919. And returns of sugar beet growers increased before and during the World War II, especially for the sugar beet grown in Europe. At the end of the World War II, however, sugar world supplies were at their lowest level, affected by all these problems in the world. Now, I would like to discuss a little bit on the resilience through institutions and organizations, because this is also part of the business that sugar cane and sugar in general have or has during the times. Sugar beet and sugar cane producers adopted complex regulatory systems. I will mention only three. We have many of them. Nowadays, even we have so many agreements that it will be just a workshop to discuss that anyway. But I want to mention that the Commonwealth Sugar Agreement signed in December 1951 was headed by UK, Australia, South Africa, Mauritius, and others. Then the European Economic Community established in 1957, signing agreements between France, West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and other countries. And of course, there were also other international regulations, like one from Japan, India, Philippines, Australia, Cuba, and Brazil. They also even established several bilateral regulations to make or adopt those kind of internal and external regulations in order to market the sugar. Today's the crop cultivation of sugar is mainly in the tropics, like you say. You see in the map the cultivation areas goes from 20 north to 20 south, mainly specifying that the sugarcane is a crop from the tropics and subtropical areas, and mainly with high productions in the tropical ones. Today, the distribution of this cropping is very widely known in the Americas, in Southeast Asia, in India, of course, and some countries of Africa. Then, because of that, the sugarcane industry today, all of us know, we just have a very nice talk from Plinio from Brazil. He showed very much data that I'm showing here. I'm just placing some examples. But we all know that currently Brazil is the world's largest sugarcane producer, followed by India, China, US, Thailand, Pakistan, Mexico, Colombia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Australia. Brazil is leading, of course, with about 42 million tons of sugar, and India, 33 million tons, then go China, United States, and so on and so forth. The global production groups in about 100 countries, and the total area of sugar production is about 27 million hectares. This is more or less the scenario that the sugarcane is produced for sugar. And the sugar market, of course, again, we all know that the largest cane sugar exporting countries are Brazil, with 32 million tons, and Thailand, and India. I'm showing here the list of the 15 major exporting countries. I'm not going to mention all of them, but the most of the exported countries goes down to Mexico and South Africa, perhaps. The export value of raw sugar for export was about 25 billion in 27. However, by 2020, there was a a 10% reduction, unfortunately. In any way, sugar is still an important commodity around the world. Then I have to come to how the sugarcane influence in the society. Sugarcane supplies about 76% of the world's sugar production or provision. It also serves as a key bioenergy feedstock. Pliny O'Brien talked very much on the use of for biofuels and electricity and other uses. But being as a major bioenergy feedstock, I would stress on the biofuel use and electricity. Many countries have adopted systems of electricity production, even connecting to the mainstream of the countries. Like in Ecuador, for example, we have 2 mills producing this kind of electricity. And the biofuels in Brazil and now becoming in India is also very important. Sugarcane cultivation and processing provides livelihoods of 100 million people. This is an important statement that I wanted to show you, to share with you. You know, it's 100 million people depending on the economic situation of the sugarcane, and sugar production is very important value for all countries around the world. What are the ongoing climate change, ongoing challenges? We have the climate change and the pandemic of COVID-19 nowadays, which is a reality. So we need to tackle these issues as well. We all know that sugarcane is a C4 plant. So physiologically was developed to produce in high temperatures with high sunshine and good water supply. So therefore, sugarcane mainly grows in the tropics and subtropical regions. To grow, the factors for cane growth actually are atmospheric CO2, presence of atmospheric CO2, temperature, precipitation, and sunshine, like I just mentioned seconds ago. And we've seen that due to climate change, there are fluctuations in Zimbabwe, for example, is facing yield fluctuations due to drought and tropical cyclones. And in the South Caribbean countries, yields may decrease by 20 to 40% due to water deficit stress because of warmer climate. The warmer climate, as in other regions, will enforce that the plant will need more water by irrigation. Also, effects on production was documented in Fiji due to weather conditions, a decrease of about 45% was found in 1997, 1998, and 2003. This is very, very an important percentage that was documented, and we have to check on other countries as well. In the northeastern Brazil, high temperatures have increased evapotranspiration rates, resulting in higher irrigation demand. So water deficits can be found due to this high temperature due to climate change. In Swaziland, due to high water demand, it will see impact in production unless irrigation is further included in their models for sugarcane production. These are just a few examples that I wanted to highlight. However, most of the countries face different scenarios due to the effect of climate change that every country or every region has to take in account several aspects of the climate change that we are living now, actually. I also would like to show a couple of ideas here for management biotic and abiotic stress under climate change. We all know that sugar production is based on genotype of the environment. Of course, the genotype is basically the varieties that we will develop to have better production under climatic conditions that we are working with. So we need to deal with the genetics. We need to be prepared for new breeding methods, reducing perhaps the years for developing varieties, expand the evaluations trials, and on some other issues, and of course use the biotechnology tools to speed up the release of varieties. We need also to develop novel methods to evaluate and phenotype new varieties in order to assign specific areas with different climates or environmental conditions. We can use, for example, to evaluate this, the phenotyping system, use drones, use infrared systems, and so on, or some others that are available today. In the environment, however, we have the abiotic and biotic stress. In the abiotic, we have light. We need to check on how the light is performing in the cropping areas. Then we check the temperatures, water either shortage or flooding, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, humidity, winds, nutrients. Here we need to actually manage the soil, and then also within this, salinity. And perhaps within the environment, I included the factory processes. We need to check on how we improve sugar extraction in the factory, because there is no good way to have good production of sugar through the factory, even if the field people send high sucrose content varieties, but in the factory are not doing a good job. So we need to check on that. In the biotic stress, we have problems. We have under the climate change situation, insects, weeds. Weeds can become resistant to some herbicides or change the ability to grow. Fungi, bacteria, and viruses, these microorganisms are can easily have mutations and become more aggressive or attack to the sugarcane in different scenarios. And of course, we will have nematodes as well. All of these have to be included in the management practices, and the management practices should be by diversifying cropping systems, crops, and cultivars. I saw yesterday a nice presentation from John Jaime from Cenicania, showing that they already started looking at opportunities to mix varieties and also the cropping systems, and of course, alternating crops, and including several cultivars in the same farm, like for example, mixing cultivars to allow a better tonnage and sugar production. This is something that we have to think of in terms of meet the situations of the climate change. And then in terms of the pandemic, of the COVID-19 and the sugar production, I found that an interesting issue in most of the countries, I would say most of the sugar cane producing countries are good in the pandemic, because the global sugar production continues despite of this coronavirus, mainly supported by a high rate of mechanizations in the harvesting and also planting and some other labor that are done in the fields and also in factory. So it helped a lot to keep the production along the years of, we are already 2 years of pandemic anyway. However, costs have increased due to new sanitary operating protocols in both field and factory operations. All of you know that the industry had to review the transportation systems, for example. They have to review doing labor shifts, shifts to to decrease the possibilities of contagious. So there were several. I can mention many of them, but these protocols have affected in some ways in the production and also the costs. So, but we are doing okay in the industry in terms of COVID-19 because the industry is really resilient. All of the industries found several ways to tackle this pandemic anyway. And on the other hand, the industry itself did contribute to during the lockdown situations by by donating groceries, alcohol. Of course, most of the industries around the world produce alcohol, and alcohol has been a very good tool to control the virus. And of course, in terms of food and supplies, the industry have donated sugar and hand sanitizers to food pantries. Also provided protective equipment to keep frontline healthcare workers safe, not only in the industry and also in the towns surrounded by that are surrounded by the mills. So this is very interesting issue that we have to say that and recognize that the industry did a good job in this area. In terms of the sugar prices, I'm not gonna talk very much. We had again a nice talk this morning by Plinio, talking on prices and so on, and the panorama of prices are not quite bad actually. But what I found is that due to ongoing pandemic and oil prices, sugar prices are unlikely to return to the levels seen in early 2016. The pandemic also has modified sugar consumption patterns due to restriction of social outings and reduced beverage consumption as well. However, the lockdown had led an interesting issue that most of the families started doing home baking and then maintaining the use of sugar. This is a very interesting situation. The predictions that I found for the 22 and 23 are not quite bad, but they're kind of stables. But the market is quite unstable and will depend on several issues like if Brazil's keep producing more ethanol instead of sugar, the same as with India and perhaps Thailand. So this is something that I want to share with you. But we had a very nice talk this morning, and perhaps you can retrieve from Plinio this information. Well, I'll go then to the continued resilience. And then here I have a couple of ideas that I want to share with you. For example, we know that the sugarcane consumption has thousands of years of history and still impacts in a whole range of economic, social, and environmental factors in the present. Sugarcane is being a traditional food, so the industry will be there and bypass several problems that might meet during the years. Of course, the sugar industry's resilience relies on its organizations. We have very strong organizations around the world, institutions, of course, and the ability to diversify. We had a very nice talk also from Brian Labrac, showing the possibilities of diversifying producing several products. And of course, in most of the countries, the support in research and developing solutions is on an ongoing situation, and this will address the risk of the sugar industry, of course, which will be in a better position if we do and support research and develop. And of course, climate change and new types of sweeteners also have forced the industry to pursue new frontiers for diversification. This is very interesting because we have, in this seminar and this workshop, we had very interesting topics on the use of sugar from sugarcane or sugar beet, anyway. But along the use of the sweeteners, it becomes clear that the sugar will be the best healthy use of in the food, of course, with the adequate measures or levels. And the sugarcane industry can conquer, of course, because the sugarcane industry has always overcome critical events and has transformed any situations into an strength, which is a great example for resilience anyway. I think I strongly believe that the sugarcane industry is one of the best resilient industries in the world. Also, we have to adapt anyway, because sugarcane has exploited its status among the best options for biomass production, high carbohydrate. We can produce sugar and fiber, and then the sugarcane we have a favorable energy input output ratio, of course. And here again, Brian showed us a very interesting scenario for diversification. And the diversification itself, based on the support with research on plant breeding, biotechnology, product diversification, soil and water resource conservation management. It's important because, as all we know, the soil is the basic for production. If we don't do good management and conservation, as well as water, then we will have problems in the future. Like I showed in my previous slides, the demand of water will increase due to the high temperatures observed in different countries and regions. And of course, the social responsibility is a basic scenario that the sugarcane industry has to tackle, because every time we need to work with the people and support people. I wanted to show only, I will go very rapid here, because again, Brian did a very good job of showing the huge products, the huge number of products that we can have from sugarcane. And here we only can see a couple of them. Of course, we know that the sugar is the basic product that can produce alcohol and ethanol, and sugar can be part of the food itself. And the fiber can be used for electricity, new products like cloths. We can produce lignin, cellulose. From cellulose, we can produce bioethanol, second generation, and then pulp, paper, and other products. And also from sugarcane, like it was mentioned, we can produce biomaterials and several other products from the sugarcane. And of course, the industry has to evolve. Every, in the world, all the living all the living entities are evolving every time. The industry has also to do the same. So we have to use the advantage of the e-commerce to increase the sales of sugar and its byproducts through transfer of data and money, and also use the Industry 4.0 that apply best management practices and data science. I believe the next talk will talk on this topic, which will be more explained. I think with that, I'm not sure if I'm okay with the time, but I will end up. Thank you for your kind attention, and perhaps I could entertain a couple of questions if I could. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Castillo, for your presentation and the coverage of the various areas. We have a few questions here for you. The first one is from a colleague in Africa, and the question is, in the prices that you quoted in a table, what were they from? Because they weren't contract 11, so that little chart that you put up, what were those prices?
Well, I tried to include only trying to set up a history of the sugar agreements. So, like I said, I didn't include all of the agreements, the contract 11, there are several others that you guys in ISO have more clear. And, I didn't go so deep on these issues because I thought I didn't have time. But anyway, there are several sources to request information, like ISO, several pages in the internet. So I would suggest to go there and ask the information from there.
Thank you, Doctor. The other one is the work that ISSCT and technicians do in the sugar industry worldwide is often not known or not recognized as it should. What can be done to better message to the entire sector and to the public at large the tremendous work that you guys do, and moreover, explain to people that it's this carpentry work that you do in varieties and research and development, which explains competitiveness and productivity? What can we do to communicate better?
Well, we are trying to improve communication right now. We just developed a new web page, for example, more accessible, more friendly, user-friendly, and also we are trying to put on the web a information system that people can access, which is a monthly newsletter, including all the work that are, all the work that is performed in different countries, and research and all developments. So people can now access to that newsletter and see not only from ISSCT but also from other sources. And we are trying to develop, like I said, more active scenarios for workshops. The pandemic showed us that nowadays we can go through the internet and not only wait for the presential or face-to-face workshops or congresses. We will go through the internet systems pursue better interchange with the members. Of course, there's a matter of resources of always, and we have to find ways to do that by the support of perhaps the industry and companies. But there are several ideas. Actually, we are having now in July our meeting by Zoom again, and we will see what are the advantages and also the other projects that we can put to improve the communication. And thank you for that question.
And one last question, and this is more a curiosity than a question. For those of you in our audience that are not entirely familiar with ISSCT, they are the largest group in the sugar world, and the meeting that Dr. Castillo mentioned is the largest in number of any sugar meeting worldwide. My question, Doctor, is what do you do now? How can you accommodate 1,200 people in Zoom?
Well, we're in the discussion about that, Jose. We hope that the pandemic will go away and take this notion that doing the Congress presential, because this is the Congresses and the workshop. We found that very useful for people, for researchers, for companies to exchange ideas, face to face, talk and get very much information directly. I know that the Zoom meetings are very good. You can sit in your house or your office and keep attending the meetings and so on, but you don't have the opportunity to talk with somebody that I am interested in. For example, I would like to talk a little bit more. I'm a plant breeding of my background, but I would like to talk with other breeders saying, hey, you are doing this, why you are doing this? And in face to face, you can get more information than by the internet, So we don't know exactly to tell you the truth. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We have to decide, and people from India, who are the organizers for the next International Congress, will have some ideas as well. But right now we are analyzing what's going to happen in the next events, even for the workshops, because the workshops might be easily to manage by internet, but the Congress is kind of difficult because, like you said, Jose, is the largest one and a very good exchange of ideas and information. I've seen people talking, getting more information, getting more agreements than anywhere during the Congress. It's a very payoff trip, I would say, to go to these Congresses anyway.
Thank you very much, Raul. I assisted to the ISSCT when it was in Guatemala, and I could witness firsthand the intangible, the energy, the chemistry between people. And I cannot imagine an ISSCT and all of your colleagues doing this by Zoom. So we pray that the situation will stabilize and that Hyderabad will be possible. And personally, and as ISO, hope to have the opportunity to join you in one of your meetings. It's just a tremendous learning experience. And there is so much there that one on a day-to-day basis doesn't notice. I mean, even us at ISO are just handcuffed in trying to keep up with all the tremendous breakthrough work that you guys are doing. It's really to be congratulated. So please, audience, join me in thanking Raul and in congratulating ISSCT for the tremendous work it does in a key area for our World Sugar family. And with this, we will go to some brief spots and then follow with our next speaker, Dr. Freddy Garces from Senjicaña. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Continuing with the agenda, we invited the General Director of the Colombian Sugarcane Research Center, Cenicaña, who will talk to us about Agriculture 4.0 applied to sugarcane agriculture. Freddy Garces is an agronomist and has a PhD in plant pathology. Welcome, Dr. Garces.
Thank you, Sonia, for your kind words. I would like to share this morning what we are doing in Colombia in terms of Agriculture 4.0, that we are going towards that kind of technology. Thank you to the organizing committee for this opportunity, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody that is connected right now. So during my talk, I will describe basically 4 topics. The first one, what do we have in Colombia? Some general information about the industry. Then I will follow for a general concept in terms of Agriculture 4.0. Thereafter, with some current status of this technology in Colombia. And finally, with some future perspectives. So what do we have? Even though you have seen during these days a lot of information or industry facts that we have here in Colombia, I just would like to remind you that we have basically 3 are located in the northern part of Colombia and the eastern area of, in the northern part of South America and the eastern area of Colombia, that we have basically 3 mega environments: the semi-dry, the humid, and the foothills conditions that defines the technology that we develop, as well as the process that we have in the field, the harvesting, and the factories. So because of the weather conditions that we have in Colombia, we have a very mild winter that allow us to harvest the cane all year around. We have basically 2 mild rainy seasons, one from March to May, and the second one from October to November, with an 1,200 millimeters rainfall per year. Here, some of the Colombian production indexes of 2020. You will see that we have more than 240,000 hectares planted last year, and we harvest almost 200,000 hectares with a crop yield of 112.5 tons of cane per hectare and a sugar yield of 12.4 tons sucrose per hectare. With those indexes, we still have the highest level of productivity in the world, and that had happened because we have the integration of cane growers, sugar mills, and scientists from Cenicaña that have been working together to improve innovation, research, development, and extension. But what are the main players in Colombia, those allies that help us to be a solid sector? Azucaña is the first one who represent the sugar Colombian sector. Procaña, that includes cane growers. Azucari, that represent the cane growers from the northern part of the Cauca Valley, as well as the Risaraldas Valley. Tecnicaña, the Colombian Society of Sugarcane Technologies, that is helping with the organization of this event. And finally, Cenicaña, our research center of Colombia. So Cenicaña is a private non-profit corporation that was founded in 1977 to generate knowledge and technology for the Colombian sugarcane industry. We are a multidisciplinary team that work together in 3 different research programs and 5 specialized services, all in order to improve the productivity and competitivity of the sugarcane Colombian sector. So what do? We basically develop varieties, local varieties, as was explained yesterday by John Jaime, and focus on a science-specific agriculture that was really well displayed by Miguel Ángel Lopez. We keep our crop healthy, disease-free, and we work a lot in biological control to avoid any problem with insects. We improve the production process of factory, as was described yesterday by Nicolas, and guarantee the transfer of all this technology. All this technology has to go to the farmers as well as the sugar mill professional staffs. We offer also specialized information, and with the data that we collect from the fields, the different networks, as well as the agribusiness, we use a lot of economic and different analytics of that information. So for the second topic, I will discuss some general concepts before reviewing the current situation of Agriculture 4.0 in Colombia. As you know, and it was described by Raul a couple of minutes ago, we have a lot of challenges, and since the year 2015, the United Nations adopted the global goals to end poverty and protect the planet for peace and prosperity, which include challenges like the extreme and climate change, the need for economic growth post-pandemic, the need to be more responsible in the way that we produce in the field and the factory, and the need for a clean energy. All of those challenges need to have investment in human capital, in infrastructure, as well as innovation. So these investments are also important to increase productivity or maintain that productivity, to reduce the risk of investments as well as decisions, to stay competitive, agile, and efficient over time. So, however, those decision variables like the productivity, the efficiency, the innovation, and the technology are the function of different variables like the environment, the soil, the availability of arable area, good management practices, consumption, the rate of change, the policy and human decisions that are controllable and not controllable. We have to know them very well in order to increase the profitability, to maximize the profitability, and to minimize the cost that we have in the field. With those, we will define the level of sustainability of the crop, the fields, and overall the agrobusiness. So this sustainability has been part of the development of agriculture, as it was described by Raul and in the sugarcane production history. In general, in agriculture, we have moved from the traditional one that used a lot of men and animal power in the past to the smart decision and device systems that include technologies like Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, and remote sensing. So on a broad sense, the development of Agriculture 4.0 required the establishment of basically these three main strategies. The first one, to know the resources that we have in the field and the environment, to measure that variability. The second one, to monitor the changes of those variability over time and space, and with that information, transfer that information to the growers to make smart decisions, all with the common objective to be more sustainable and resilient, as was explained by Raul. So at the Cauca River Valley, the industry has studied the soil and the environment for several years, and we have defined the variability of those conditions in 35 layers of information that include the fields, the farms, the soil types, the mega environments, the 7 climatic zones that we have in Colombia, 161 agroecological zones, the productivity, and so on. To monitor changes in time and space, there is a necessity of transversally smart services like telecommunication and networks to collect the data from the fields. This slide describes the way that we have established those 7 climatic zones based on the information that we have collected from 38 automatic weather stations during more than 20 years. With the different variables that we have, define the different climatic zones. With this information, it's very useful to answer questions related not only with weather management, but also for production projections and weather forecasting. So to make those smart decisions, as I described it, we need to have all the variability, all the data. And this is an example of what we have reached at this moment with these 161 agroecological zones that are important for variety selection and planting, as well as for agronomic practices. So with these strategies, during 43 years of research and development, Senicaña has delivered several technologies that had helped the growers and the mills to increase productivity in about 50%, from 0.5 tons of sucrose per hectare per month to 1.2 tons of sucrose per hectare per month. At the beginning, the sugarcane industry was highly dependent on foreign technology. Then, from Senicaña, when the Senicaña started and working together with growers and cereal mills, more collective actions and new technology was developed, like local varieties, and later new technologies that were focused on a site-specific agriculture approach. So, but in a narrow sense, what is the path towards agriculture or agroindustry 4.0 in Colombia? To follow that path towards agriculture 4.0, we have to establish basically three main steps. The first one, to establish the telecommunications infrastructure and tools. The second one, to analyze that big and small data using modeling and good computer capacity. And the last one, the information access, communication, and network need to be established for the growers and mills to use that information in your daily decisions. So for the first one, several transversally smart services and tools need to be established to collect data from the field, transfer that information to the decision system support for crop management, harvesting, processing in the factory, as well as for research development. We have established several networks, different technologies like the precision agriculture or a site-specific agriculture, the Internet of Things that was described by Miguel Ángel yesterday, field harvesting, transport, and factory sensors, drone support, omics using bioinformatics, digital agriculture, and recently smart factory IoT gadgets. So to continue developing and consolidating this smart decision system, Colombia has invested in 5 different networks. The first one, the automatic meteorological network to analyze the meteorological and climatological information. The real-time kinematic network that is using topography and satellite navigation system. The network for monitoring airborne contaminated material. The hydrometeorological network that is used in the basins to know the quality and the quantity of the water that is coming. And lastly, the IoT or the LoRa network that it was recently established. So as an example, the RTK network of real-time kinematic, which allows the geopositioning of machinery in real time using satellite navigation, is the first one in Latin America to have a multi-brand technology. So we have the chance to collect the different brands that we have here in terms of machinery in the field. And to validate and study the benefit of this technology, the agronomy program studied the impact that this new technology may have in the harvesting process. And they found a 52% of reduction in installed traffic equipment, 20 liters less of fuel consumption per hectare, and 6% less reduction in the clogging process, during the harvesting process. So the most recent smart decision system established is the Internet of Things network of LoRa. We place sensors in the soil so that the growers know the best time for irrigation. In this way, we want to improve the efficiency of water use in the fields. We have reduced so far 50% the use of water in commercial fields, and in the factory about 20%. So as I described it before, it's important to consider the environmental offer as an input for the Ag 4.0. Since the year 2000, a new approach of site-specific agriculture was established. And with this approach, the breeding program is working together in a breeding selection process that takes into account around 10 to 12 years to select and develop new varieties. It is divided basically in 3 different stages: the crossing process, the selection stages, and the regional trials, where the varieties are evaluated in different environments. We start with about 120,000 plants and release every year about 3 to 5 new varieties. So to support the breeding program, all the process and increase the efficiency of selection for those new varieties, as well as the parents, the sector has invested in developing technology for genotyping and phenotyping. This was described yesterday by John Jaime. With this technology, we have identified 48 selected markers, and we are in the process of validation, comparing those molecular markers with the phenotypes that we have in the field. Those markers are associated basically with sucrose content and resistance to disease and pest. By using bioinformatics at the same time, we had advanced in a project to sequence the monoploid genome. So far in the variety CC011940, we have identified more than 63,000 genes. And to improve that process of phenotyping that I described it before, analyzing the crop in the field, those experiments that we have during the breeding process, and the agronomy program has developed several sensors, and there is a prototype for this robotic platform for field phenotyping that is in the process of validation, that was described by Miguel, that we call phenotype, that is going to be very useful to follow the phenotypes in the field. Probably this technology will help in the future the growers to follow their crop in the field using some other technologies like robotics. With the data and information, the second step uses the big and small data. As an example of the outputs, we have the weather forecasting, pest and risk analysis, grower benchmarking, as was described by Miguel Angel yesterday with the geoportal, information modeling, and recently the supply chain project. So the data is basically gathered from all fields and automatic networks, as well as individual database. And by using several analytic software, from statistics to mathematics, and some technology like machine learning, that information is transferred finally to the growers. One of the examples that we are using analytically driving smart decisions is the supply chain project, in which we want to use big and small data to optimize all the process from the agriculture, from the field, through the processing, the packaging, the storage, the distribution, and finally to receiving some information of the final consumers. With all that, we want to reduce the cost, the CO2 emissions, improving efficiency during the field harvesting and factory process. With this slide, I just would like to describe to you that we are using historical data for a regional sugarcane yield forecasting. We use the information from the weather forecasting to predict the productivity that we may have in a 6-month window of time for the different climatic zones. The last level of Ag 4.0, in a narrow sense, is the information access. extension, and networking, in which we use basically different web and app mobile applications. And we work together with human capital training to transfer that technology and reduce the gap of technology knowledge. To support that specific agriculture and to follow the path of Agriculture 4.0, Cenicaña has developed several apps like the map server or geoportal, the meteorological and climatological server, the sugarcane variety recommendation app, the ISO productivity curve, some other gadgets for agronomy decisions, like the agronomy practices, the soil water hydrology balance, and the app for disease detection that was recently released that facilitates the identification of signs and symptoms associated with diseases. The geoportal that was explained yesterday by Miguel Ángel is a benchmarking web app that has 35 layers of information that go from a group of humidity to the query by ton of cane per hectare. So with this information, the mills as well as the farmers, the cane growers have the chance to know what is the potential production that they may have according to the neighbor production. The other output of analytical information for smart farming decision is the forecasting weather service that forecasts and make prediction of weather conditions in a daily, in a weekly, and monthly basis. On the slide, you could see on your left the different climatic zones that we have in Colombia, and this is the forecast for rainfall, the minimum and the maximum temperature that the different climatic zones may have during the day. And on your right, you could see the forecasting for the week. For example, this week that we are having this ISO meeting for rainfall conditions that are published every day in our web page. So to reduce the gap of that technology and technological knowledge, Cenicaña has established several strategies for technology transfer and extension, like the technology transfer group that basically teach trainers to train people, the training and technical assistance program, the sustainable program, which is called Integra, that offer guidelines to the growers to follow the path towards our more sustainable level of production, and the Impulsa program, that is basically the circle of innovative farmers that are driving the adoption and technologies. One of those examples is the PAT program, Extension and Technical Assistance Program. This program that is explained in this slide helps to identify the limiting and reducing factors of productivity in cane growers and mills using several smart decisions services like app and the one that the geoportal to identify the potential productivity. Then when that information is established, several plans are developed, executed, and finally, all that new ideas or solutions are tracked to measure the impact that that new technology or knowledge may have in productivity. So even though several perspectives for agri-industry 4.0 includes new technology, gadgets, devices, and tools, there is an opportunity in autonomous operation in the field and factory, not only for autonomous tractors or irrigation systems, but also for robotics and real-time analytic softwares. For example, small robots that carry sensors to monitor soil, growth plant health, and width may help to adjust the management practice in the field for irrigation, fertilization, and weed control decision. This technology would help us to be more responsible in the way that we produce the cane in the field, and it will help us to reduce the CO2 emissions in the future. One of the major benefits of Agriculture 4.0 will be a more controlled and responsible process that will be less wasteful. That will help us to link the farmers to the buyers and other stakeholders. For that, we will need to know more about the supply chains, to study the logistics, how to improve the process, how to be more efficient in the resources and less wasteful during the field and the factory process. And we also need to use some other technologies like the blockchain that will help us to increase the traceability and that transparency during the process to link the cane growers to the final consumer. That sure will help the buyers to have more confidence in the sugar that they buy. So on the slides, you could see that there are several driving factors for productivity that we may have here in Colombia, for example, that are going towards Agriculture 4.0. We have ideal conditions here, like the water availability, the site-specific technology. We have a really good soil fertility. But if we don't have the integration of different organizations like Asocaña, Procaña, Sucari, Tecnicaña, and Senicaña, we wouldn't be able to establish priorities and goals. There is a need also to invest in a long-term funding of research. That technology has to be very participative. We have to develop technologies in which we have all the actors. The researchers and scientists, they have to be a really good team, a multidisciplinary team that give ideas from a different point of view. And it's important to have an extension and talent people that have the chance to transfer all that knowledge from the researchers to the growers and the sugar mills professional staff. If we don't have all these conditions, we wouldn't be able to increase the level of productivity and to follow the path toward Agriculture 4.0. So as a final message, I would like to share some words of John Chambers, who was the former CEO of Cisco. During a conference, he said that in 10 years, 7% of the companies will attempt to go digital, but only 30% will succeed. And he also said that those that aren't left behind, but are slower to transform and use technology effectively, will be disrupted. With that, I just want to acknowledge to our donors, the Colombian sugarcane growers and sugar mills, as well as the technologists from the sector for their support and contribution to the process of research, technological development, transfer, and innovation. With this, I would like to share with you a final video in which you will see some general information about Agriculture 4.0 in Colombia. And then we will go back for your questions. Thanks.
Jose, it's moment to
I mean,
questions.
amazing, Freddie. I mean, I am just gasping. I mean, I can't think of a better way to end this international workshop. This presentation is just extraordinary, and it brings home all of the various aspects that Colombia is doing right, in the vanguard of agricultural development and the usage of all kinds of tools, internet, and otherwise. I mean, the analysis of the variables, the RTK, the site-specific agriculture, the LoRa application brings it all together, and I cannot thank you and your team enough for putting it together, because I noticed that you cleverly drafted from Miguel Angel and from other presentations in order to put together an integrated vision of what you do in the various fields to stay at the cutting edge technology. It's just incredible. We really have no questions because I think the presentation is just blows you away. I would imagine a lot of people are going to be contacting you down the road, but I had just two small points here, Freddie. One is integrated pest management. How much do you use it? Do you, like other countries, employ techniques like neutered insects to reduce any given pest? Or what other actions do you take in integrated pest management, IPM?
Thank you, Jose. And thank you for your kind words in the name on behalf of the people from Cenicaña that have been working really hard for 43 years. The biological control is one of the techniques that we are being using for more than 30 years. I think that in Cenicaña, they were before Cenicaña established in the sugarcane sector. So the history of the biological control in Colombia is basically the history of biological control in the sugarcane cultivation. We've been using parasites and other different agents to reduce the level of intensity in the fields with those diatria, for example, different species that we have right now. And that is one of the best way to reduce the impact that we may have in the environment. Even though it doesn't seem related, but when we use resistant varieties, we are also using biological control. We have released all these more than 150 varieties that are resistant to the major diseases that we have in Colombia. And recently, we've been working in a new idea using a biological control from the fields around the different crop. For example, we have improved the population of weeds that are useful for the increase of some parasites that we may have around the fields. And then we have seen improvement of the reduction or intensity of those pests in the fields. And at the same time, we have seen increase the level of population of some bees that are important to not only for biological control, but that are very important to agriculture in different crops.
Thank you very much, Freddie. And the second one would be, and I think you've alluded to it, and your colleagues have too. How closely do you interlink with the other Cenicañas in the world? For example, with my friend Dr. Mario Melgar with Cenicaña in Guatemala, with other institutes that dedicate their time to the same issues that you address. And what can ISO do to improve that communication and enhance the capacity for everyone in the World Sugar family to learn more about what Cenicaña does and extrapolate what they can apply in their own reality?
Thank you, Jose, for that question. We have interacted with other countries and research stations around the world since the beginning of Senicaña. When Senicaña started, we have the chance to go to South Africa and to know what they were doing at that time. And some of the technology that they had, we brought that technology to Colombia. And from then, we had been having a good relation with other research centers around the world, like the SRI from Australia, and RIDESA in Brazil, Senjicaña in Guatemala, SINCAE from Ecuador, and so on. So we have the chance to contact different research centers in order to share information and experience about different advances in technology and knowledge that they have. We also have a consortium, an international consortium for sugarcane biotechnology. We have shared a lot of experience about this line of improvement that we may bring to the breeding process, as well as the management of diseases and pests. So we have worked together with different research centers around the world, and we cannot do this kind of advances alone. We have to help together to reach those goals that everybody has in their country, but have a common objective to improve the productivity to everybody.
Well, thank you once again, Freddie, and please avail yourself as ISO. We are at your service, and we'd love to facilitate any contacts to serve as a platform. Our forums are your home. Anything and everything we can do to further the work that you guys carry out and liaise with other parties throughout the world, we are at your service. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you, Jose, for your words, and I will see you soon. I hope that you could have a chance to come to Colombia and to share that cup of coffee and that we have here in the mountains, as well as the sugar that we produce in the Cauca River Valley.
Yes.
No, I'll definitely be there, Freddie. First chance I get, you're going to have me visiting you. Before we take a short break for spots and come back to Ambassador Ardila to close, I just want to make sure that all of you are clear that we've got an amazing cultural program put together by our friends in Colombia to culminate this workshop. Don't miss it for anything in the world. Brief spots, and we're coming back with His Excellency Ambassador Ardila. Thank you. We are now back again, and it gives me a great pleasure and a great honor to introduce the chairman of the ISO Council, Ambassador Antonio Ardila from Colombia. As I told you in the offset, we at the Secretariat are privileged to have for this 2021 Ambassador Ardila and his team. They have been extraordinary in rising up to any challenge, addressing all issues, no matter how small, how minute. They are always there in the best disposition, evidencing the quality and the high level and professionalism that we have seen distinguishes Colombia. So, Ambassador, please join us and give us the closing remarks for this tremendous two-day workshop.
Thank you very much, Jose. It's really been a very special day that we have had today, and also a really special day that we had yesterday. I think that what we have seen is that there's a great future in sugar and sugarcane, and I think that our panelists are obviously. I want to thank our four panelists of today, our four panelists yesterday. They have done a great job of putting in very clear perspective what the sugar world looks like now, and what it could look like in the near future, and of what it should look like in beyond that. So we have perspectives of great possibilities for the development of sugar into a very important part of the challenge that we have that is coming, that is already here, a challenge of climate change. We really have to work for that, and I think that sugar and derivatives of sugar will provide for solutions to many of the problems that we do have and that are coming and that we need to face. So it is something very, very of great value. What was presented today. Ethanol obviously is becoming more and more important every day. Biofuels are really essential. So I think that there's a great possibility there, and the world is looking into that. Obviously, we're also the possibilities of products coming from sugar are fantastic. It's a question of zeroing in and seeing what is the best opportunity that each producer has. So it's something that provides for possibilities and great opportunities for the future. So it is something that is essential for, and that is ingrained in the sugar industry. Also, it's talking about a long life and a very long future that sugar and sugarcane have is the resilience of the industry, the resilience of the product, and the possibilities and how it has been changing in time and adapting to the necessities of humanity. So this is something that we're looking into, and I'm sure that everyone who has heard what was said today from the four panelists is looking for looking and try. I'm sure a great deal of research will be coming out of what has been said today, and also the agriculture 4.0 and the technology that is being applied. It really gives me great satisfaction and pride to see how Colombia is developing its technology, the level of sophistication it has been able to achieve, and with the way it has been able to do it and sharing it with amongst all the producers in the country, and it shows in the productivity and the efficiency of production of the different sugar mills. But it is something that there's a clear mind, and there are very clear minds and great scientists behind it, and there is the desire to apply it in the industry. So it is something of great value, and we are seeing it being applied and with great results. And this is a step in the future and going into the future, and always looking for new and better ways of doing things and applying technology in the best way possible. So I do feel that we have had a great day today. We have had a great 2 days in which so many things have been of great value and of great depth have been shown. And I think that this seminar of 2 days really shows how powerful this industry is and how well-based it is in technology and the possibilities that it has towards the future. I don't want to leave without thanking all the group and our people in Colombia, what they have done. They have done a great job. I couldn't be more happy and of what has been done and the way it has been done. So it's a great 2 days, and I want to thank the ISO for giving us this opportunity to showcase what Colombia has been able to develop and what hopefully we will continue to do in the future. Thank you so much.